Hi, Chairman. We're now live.
Thank you, and a very warm welcome to a virtual meeting of the Major Application Planning HS2 Subcommittee of the London Borough of Hillingdon. This is a virtual meeting that is also being broadcast simultaneously on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon London. My name is Councillor Steve Tuckwell, and I am the Chairman of this evening's proceedings. Before we start, there's some important online housekeeping for everybody present. Can I just ask that people ensure that any mobile phones around you are on silent? If you are wearing a headset, can you ensure that the microphone is away from your mouth to avoid any background noise? Please keep the microphone muted when not speaking and then unmute to speak. And only one person may speak at a time, and I as Chairman will call those to speak. Okay, as this is in an online format, I will have to do an attendance roll call just to confirm everybody is in attendance. So I will call your name out if you could just indicate that you are present. So I'll start with the Vice Chairman, Councillor Lavery.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hagger.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. The Labour lead, Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I'm here, thank you.
And Councillor Morgan.
Present, Mr. Chairman.
And Councillor Oswell.
Present, Chairman.
Okay, is that all members accounted for, Luke?
Yes, that's all members.
Okay, now I have to do the same with officers supporting this evening's proceedings. So I'll start off with our planning officer, Ian Thine.
Present, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Our head of planning, James Roger.
I'm present, Chairman. Thank you.
Luke, you're here as our Democratic Services Officer, but are you present?
I am present. Thank
Okay.
you.
And our legal advisor and borough solicitor, Raj Ola.
Present, Chairman.
Okay. Right, is that everybody accounted for, Luke?
Yes, that's everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Right, in terms of technical meeting control this evening, if any councillor leaves the virtual meeting partway through a loss of connection, etc., then I will continue the meeting unless we are not quorate, which, as we know, is 3 councillors. Important to know that any councillor who does leave the meeting for a period of time will not be able to vote on the item that they were not present on. Okay, so that's the housekeeping arrangements confirmed. We can now start to move into the main body of the agenda. So we'll start with agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Luke.
We have apologies from Councillor Brightman, and Councillor Chapman is substituting.
Okay, thank you. And welcome, Councillor Chapman, and thank you for stepping in as a substitute this evening. Okay, agenda item 2, any declarations of interest in matters before this evening's meeting? If I could just ask if people could indicate. I take it that there's no declarations. So that means we can move on to agenda item 3, which is to receive and agree the minutes of the last meeting. There are 2 sets of minutes. One was the meeting confirming the chair and vice chair of the 14th of May. Again, I'll just pause if there's any. No, I can take it that they're agreed. And then there was the meeting, the main meeting of the 20th of May. Again, I'll just pause for a second. Okay, Luke, I can confirm both of those meeting minutes are agreed, yeah?
Thank you very much.
Okay, then we can move on to agenda item 4, which is matters notified in advance or urgent, which there aren't any. And agenda item 5 is to confirm whether items are in public or private, which I can confirm all items being debated this evening are in public. There are no private items. So that's the sort of the leading up to the main applications this evening. So then we can now go to agenda item 6, which is the land at Jews Lane in Harefield. And I'll now pass over to Ian to present that application. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. Just checking you can all hear me. Excellent. Right. Presenting now. So hopefully you can all see this. Right. So agenda item 6, Chairman, thank you. Agenda item 6 is a Schedule 17 submission under the HS2 Act for the widening of Jews Lane. Unlike any other planning applications, HS2 prefers to work in blue line boundaries. So here you'll see what was normally equivalent of a red line boundary. This is the area where the works will take place. So it's off Harville Road, leading up to Harefield, and it's actually the road, the current access road down to the Hillingdon Outdoor Activity Centre and several other dwellings on the right-hand side. To the south of the existing road is agricultural land or an area of woodland, which I'll come on to shortly. So the works being sought for approval today are: 1, the construction of a new permanent carriageway converges to the south of the existing Jews Lane alignment and creation of structural and landscape earthworks. The provision of earthworks for an associated drainage pond, including some ancillary types of activity. 3, drainage and culvert head walls, so further engineering works. And 4, the provision of permanent fences to demarcate land. And as per normal under the HS2 Act, it's the alignment of fences, not the actual type of fences that is the matter. So to give you some context, this is the existing Jews Lane. They have to build a viaduct at the end of this over the Hoack Lake. And as you can see from that image, it's not an adopted highway in the first instance, but it's not very wide. You need to take large-scale heavy goods vehicles, and also they would need to be able to keep access open for cottages and those buildings that will remain on the right-hand side, and also to Hoack. Now, they can't do that on this existing network, so what they have to do is effectively build a new alignment, a new road to the left of this one as you look at the screen. So to the south side in Planning Street, to the left as you look at this screen. The Jews Lane effectively shifts to the left. Here's the engineering works that we talked about. Fairly straightforward. It's just that road shifting slightly further south. It takes in engineering work such as the movement of utilities. Interestingly enough, there's also a badger crossing to enable badgers to get from one side of the road where they are currently located at the Jews Farm site of importance for nature conservation to the other side. So that's broadly well supported. And then moving further down, just to give an indication, that blue block on the screen there, that's currently a building that will be demolished. That's why that's indicating that colour. Moving further down Jews Lane, you'll see the blue block again, just to give you a sense of bearings. And then you can see the road going all the way into Hoack. And at the bottom of the road, you'll see the pond for drainage. So that's a storage area for the outfalls. You can see more buildings, Jews cottages that will be destroyed or demolished, should I say, to make way for the viaduct. There's also a little access road being created off here. I'll just come into that in a bit more detail. So in essence, a relatively straightforward application. In terms of being certainly not as complicated as the tunnel portal we dealt with last time. So just coming onto that access road, the intention, this is the plan from the original environmental statement. You can see Jews Lane going down here to Hoack, the viaduct moving across here. And what was originally intended was a large-scale feeder station, National Grid feeder station, which will provide power to the viaduct and the train network. Which was going to be accessed off Harville Road. Now, we dealt with this access road, well, actually, this is agenda item 7 now because it was deferred from last time. We'll deal with that in a bit more detail later. But the permanent access for this will now be off Jews Lane. So that's a welcome change. We'd rather not have access off Harville Road. The access will be taken off Jews Lane. That's the permanent. So we're approving the spur we put in at this point. The design of the road will come to the council in due course. So that's why there's a slight road to nowhere at the minute in the plans, but that's the intention long term. I talked about sites of importance for nature conservation. You'll see the green areas. These are all what we call sinks, sites of importance for nature conservation. And this one here is a grade 1. So this is the largest or the best scale of our sinks within our borough. Before you get to regional designations and then national designations like SSI, sites of special scientific interest. Now, you can see the road network. It takes into a very small element of this sink, and that's important because one of the grounds that we can consider this Schedule 17 on is whether or not it would protect nature conservation value in the area. Now, we've tried and failed before on securing that through Schedule 17, where there is a very small impact. There was an original pond where we asked for more information, and the planning inspector deemed that there was sufficient information. Now, based on that, and based on the very minimal impact on this particular part of the sink, which covers both sides of the road, officers do not think it's necessary to seek any further information in relation to nature conservation value. We believe that there's sufficient information to enable us to be able to make a decision. And then secondly, you'll also remember that if we did determine that there was a necessary, or that there was an impact, then it would be necessary for us to determine how we would be able to get this road on here whilst avoiding that part of the sink. And it's officer's opinion that that would not necessarily be, it would be unreasonable to attempt that. So the recommendations we'll come on to in a second, but that's our view on the impact on nature conservation value. Another area that we can comment on is archaeological value. Our archaeological advisor would determine that there is no impact on archaeology. So we are, so again, no objections in relation to that. So just moving down, just giving an indication as to the impact on the sink. The orange trees are going to be, or the orange blobs are going to be removed to make way for the Jews Lane widening. On the image below, the red is apparently going to be lost to the viaduct, but also you'll be able to see that some of those will be lost to the Jews Lane widening. So in the grand scheme of things, there is a minimal impact on that sink. So another reason to not necessarily invoke another appeal. So fairly straightforward earthworks for a new road. So the recommendation from the office is for approval, subject to two non-standard informatives. General comment about ensuring protected species are suitably accounted for in the construction and operation. And then secondly, this is a slightly bigger concern, is that although we are being asked to approve some of the drainage outfalls, we don't actually know where those drainage outfalls go to. Now, the impact of flooding in this area is very minimal. The area in question is flood zone 1. There aren't many properties to flood, and there is a storage area. So in general, we don't have a concern. We don't think that the impacts are that great. That said, we don't have much information at the minute to be able to determine whether that outfall is appropriate for this local authority to eventually adopt. So there is a marker down for HS2 Limited that the drainage in this area is not necessarily going to be up to a standard for an adopted highway, and further work is required. But in general, in terms of the lead local flood authority's role, we do not think that, regardless of that lack of information, that there would be an impact to residents given the few receptors in the area. So a recommendation for approval, subject to those two informatives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian, for taking us through that. So before I throw the debate open to members, I'm going to invite Raj to come in and give us some legal insight from his perspective. Raj?
Thank you, Chairman. Can all members hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you, Raj.
I will keep my legal comments brief. This is one of the most, if not the most, straightforward Schedule 17 application which this subcommittee has had to consider since its inception. In very simple terms, there are no statutory grounds on which to refuse the application or to attach any conditions to it, and therefore it is my view that it would be entirely appropriate for the subcommittee to approve this application. Now, as Ian has indicated in his presentation, it is also recommended that two informatives are attached to the approval if members agree this. And obviously informatives are something very different in nature to conditions. They're not featured in the High Speed 2 Act, and they are informal in nature and are very difficult, if not impossible, to enforce. But nevertheless, they are an important part of this application, and therefore members will obviously need to consider this for themselves. But my advice is that there are no legal impediments to members agreeing this recommendation this evening.
Okay, thank you for your input there, Raj. Okay, I think we've got enough to now throw this open to members to debate. I'm pretty sure I saw Councillor Duncan there indicating, so do you want to start off the debate?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy with this. The only question I have, and I realise this is different from our normal applications, but there are a number of trees that are being removed. And in the photograph, we saw that there were trees lining the, the little road that's there at the present time. And also trees take up a huge amount of moisture. They drink up gallons from the ground. With all these trees being removed, and I can see that that may be a factor in considering flooding, are they going to be replacing a number of trees which we're just not seeing as part of this application? Or is that something that is an agreed part of an agreed programme of planting with them anyway? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Ian, are you able to pick up those points?
Certainly, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I would start by saying, firstly, the landscaping plans are for another day, so we will get to comment on those in due course. It's a shame that it doesn't all come together at the same time, but that's the way that this is currently playing out, which is unfortunate. So there will be a Schedule 17 submission at a later date about landscaping and bringing into use. I should also point out that there was a significant tree planting just to the east of this site already, so effectively lengthening the size of Juice Farm Sink, so the bit that I showed you on the map. So there is already a great deal of trees already planted. They did some early tree planting, which unfortunately failed to start with, but they've all been replaced. So there is a significant amount more trees down there than will eventually be lost. But ultimately, the hope is that we have no net loss in biodiversity value in the area, and that includes trees. And hopefully we'll get more trees. And just on that final point, you saw the image with the feeder station that I showed you, where that will go just north of this site. That will be covered by trees where there are no current trees at the minute. So it's agricultural land at the minute that will be effectively put aside for wildlife planting, predominantly to screen the feeder station, but ultimately will have an ecological value as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Duncan, you okay with that?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Lavery, you indicated.
I did, thank you, Chairman. We have, as a legal officer, confirmed a straightforward application in front of us. There are no statutory grounds under the HS2 Act for us to really object to. I think we all accept we would like the complete picture in terms of drainage and so forth. The reality is we're not going to get it at this stage. And I think I would agree with the officer that whilst encroaching on the conservation area is not ideal, there isn't really any other alternative, which again, under the Act, gives us very little room for manoeuvre. So on that basis, I would be happy to support the officer recommendation for approval subject to the two informatives in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you, Councillor Lavery. Anybody else indicating on this this application? Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I'm happy to second it, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan. Okay, we are moved and seconded, so we can now go to an individual vote. Councillor Lavery, you move, so I take it you're in support.
I am.
Okay, so can we go to Councillor Chapman?
Go with officer's recommendation, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hagger?
Yes, for, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, you seconded, so I take it you're for.
For, Chairman, thank you.
Okay, good. Councillor Oswald?
Yes, for, Chairman.
And Councillor Morgan?
For.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll make that 6, Luke, unanimous for offer's recommendation with those two informatives.
Yes, I have the same.
Okay, so I can confirm agenda item 6 is approved. Okay, thank you everybody for that one. They can now move on to agenda item 7, which members might recall we had this one at our last meeting We deferred it because we didn't have enough information, but I think Ian's had an update since then and is now going to take us all through it. So over to you, Ian, for agenda item 7.
Thank you, Chairman. So we'll start the presentation now. Right. So agenda item 7, as you rightly say, Chairman, this was deferred from the last meeting a few weeks ago. The reason for the deferral was some information came alight at the day before, unfortunately, which ultimately meant, you see on this map here, that there's 2 access roads where they intend to drive large goods vehicles. Initially, there was 100 goods vehicles between these 2 sites, so 50 in, 50 out. So that would be 25 in, 25 out on the southern one, 25 in, 25 out on the northern site. The information that came day before the committee indicated that the vast majority, which about ultimately was going to be up to nearly 100, so 50 in, 50 out on that northern site alone. So that was a slight raising of a concern about the extent of usage, the intensive use of that site near New Year's Green Lane, which required additional information to be submitted as to how that access was going to be managed safely. And this is the outgoing section. So the information that came forward indicated that vehicles turning left off Harble Road onto this access site here, broadly shown in a circle, where we talked about the feeder station will be. This is a large or long access road. So in terms of vehicles turning left, the applicant has indicated that there's plenty of storage space, if you like, to hold vehicles on that access road should there become queues on Harble Road, or should there be not go through the booking in systems as quickly as they intend. So from that perspective, it's unlikely that we would see queuing, which was a significant concern obviously on Harble Road. Turning right, obviously 50 vehicles turning right out of this in a day, it's not ideal. But what the applicant has confirmed and as supported by our own highways officers is that there is plenty of sight lines at this particular point. There's been a lot of tree clearance here anyway, but this is not on the bend as you'll see down towards New Year's Green Lane further south. So there's plenty of sight lines. So that's the first initial concern that seems to be offset. And then secondly, there will be signposts either side advising of slow turning vehicles. Now, the other thing that we wanted to check as officers was one of the issues raised by the councillors was relating to whether or not vehicles could turn left out of here and up to Moorhall Road roundabout, and then effectively come all the way around the roundabout and then get onto the southbound side of Harble Road that way. Highways engineers were concerned about that. It was deemed that large goods vehicles turning around there is not sufficient turning room to be able to do that on a regular basis, as frequently as it would be used in this instance, 50 a day. So it was deemed that would actually be a safety risk for other users of Moorhall Road and Harble Road. So the intention is that it would just be right turn out of here, safely managed by signposts and good sight lines. So going to the recommendation, again, the recommendation now is for the deferred applications now for approval, subject to the informative that you can see before you. So the applicant must ensure appropriate signage is installed north and south of the access road, providing clear notice of the potential for slow-moving vehicles on the road. The applicant must also monitor the use of turning and provide the council, as the Highways Authority, necessary updates with regards to safety. The council reserves the right to seek alternative arrangements as a Highways Authority, that is, if there is evidence the access is being used in an unsafe manner. There must be no queuing traffic on Harble Road. All vehicles waiting to be moved to the main parts of the worksite must not be held on Harble Road. The access road or alternative locations within the site must provide the holding areas for waiting vehicles. So there we go, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you for taking us through that, Ian. As ever, I will now hand over to Raj to give us an insight from a legal perspective. Over to you, Raj.
Thank you again, Chairman. As Ian has explained, this report is a carryover from the subcommittee's meeting on the 14th of May. And the reason why the report was deferred was because it was to allow High Speed 2 Limited to provide more details on the access arrangements, particularly in relation to the northern access site. And as is set out on the top of page 32 of the report, and as explained by Ian in his presentation, High Speed 2 Limited has now provided this further information, which allows this particular application to be considered and determined. As Ian has said, the recommendation in the report is that the application should be approved, but that there should be an informative which Ian has read out and which there's no need for me to repeat. And the comments that I made in relation to the previous report on the legal status of informatives applies equally here, and I don't think that there is any need for me to repeat that particular advice. But what I would like to say, Chairman, is this. It's my view that if members agree the recommendations in the report, this would achieve a satisfactory balance between allowing the necessary high-speed 2 works to take place, whilst at the same time protecting the integrity of the borough's roads. And that is always a difficult balance to satisfy, but I think in this particular instance, on the basis of the further information provided by High Speed 2 Limited and their attempts to address the council's concerns, it's my view that that correct balance has in this instance been struck. If the recommendations are approved by members, that would then also obviate the need for another needless and unnecessary appeal from High Speed 2 Limited. So, Chairman, that is my legal advice to members of the committee.
Thank you, Raj. I'm sure committee members would have taken on board your very valid points that you raised there. So I had Councillor Morgan, you indicated you want to start the debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've listened to everything and I remember this at the last meeting. I still actually have issues with the heavy goods vehicles turning right to leave the site onto Harville Road, especially when we have queues at the moment coming from New Year's Green Lane onto the Harville Road to access the civic amenity site. You know, what we're trying to do now is turn around and say, hey guys, you can still turn your heavy goods vehicles right, even though there could well be a long queue of cars waiting to get past the New Year's Green Lane junction. That's the only issue I actually have with this, and it would be nice to try and get some comfort that you know, we're not going to just cause further heartache for our residents in this area.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Morgan. Councillor Lavery, you indicated?
I did, Chairman, thank you. I note Councillor Morgan's concerns. I mean, obviously, the issues of the civic amenity site do relate more to its previous closure and are probably more temporary, because certainly normally during the week, that junction does operate reasonably well. I accept at the current moment there will be difficulties, but those are likely to pass. We've also got to consider this in the light of the legal advice we have just been given. If we don't approve this, we are going to be in an appeal situation again with HS2. They have provided us with information to explain how they will control the junction. That portion of Harville Road, as the officer explained, is it is reasonably straight. The sight lines are pretty good, because once you come past the New Year's Green Lane and the Hoag entrances, it does straighten up and get reasonable sight lines. So I don't think we're going to get any more than we've got. And I would also think that in terms of the requirements of the Act and how much scope we've got with this, I don't think we have got any further scope to raise further queries, accepting that in an ideal world we'd not wish to put 50 more vehicles down the Harville Road, but that is the access and we can't change that. So on the basis of those comments, subject to whatever else my colleagues might add, I'm happy to support officer recommendation with the informatives in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lavery. You've got a number of councillors have indicated there, so we'll start with Councillor Hagger.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Morgan, but also really mindful that obviously legally and what we have in front of us has actually been checked, and there's not an awful lot I think we can really do about it. And I do have one question. Do we know who monitors the amount of lorries coming in and out? Because for me, it's okay if there are 50 lorries going in and out, but what happens if that increases? I suppose we don't know, do we, is the answer. But say that suddenly increased to 100 lorries going in and out, who would be monitoring that?
Ian, can I put that one to you, sir?
Certainly, Gemma. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hagar. It's a very good question because it is it's an ongoing battle with HS2 to get this level of information. What accompanies these planning applications is local transport management plan, which sets out these figures, and those figures are there for what they call environmental minimum requirements. So they cannot surpass those levels of numbers without being in breach of effectively a planning control. It's not technically a planning control because it's not imposed through this submission, but it is a control on the project. So there is that backstop there. Now, what does that breach mean? Well, that's still open to debate as to exactly how much, what teeth that has. In terms of monitoring, well, each contractor is supposed to provide their monitoring details, monitoring data to the council. We do receive that. It's not quite in the way that we want it, and we're still fighting HS2 Limited to get that information. And you'll note from one of our previous lorry route submissions, we put a condition on for monitoring, which they subsequently appealed, and on one of the previous applications it was rejected. That one's still open for, still before an inspector as a second appeal. So we had tested that before, which is and to some extent we failed on one and we're still open on another. So the issue is, it's a very real issue, and we really do need to get HS2 Limited to be a bit more straightforward with their monitoring. But in terms of this submission, the only way we could do that is through a condition which an inspector has already effectively ruled not applicable to these submissions. So we have to be mindful of that. So it's through another course that we have to seek that information.
Councillor Hagger, did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, I've got Councillor Duncan. You showed your hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do take on board the points that Councillor Morgan has made about this and the amount of traffic, but the alternative would be that they would turn left and go down to the Moorhall Road junction, which I do think is less preferable because you're taking heavy goods vehicles down to past houses, past the shops on the corner. It's difficult to manoeuvre that roundabout, as has already been said. So although this isn't ideal, I do think that the options that have been put forward and explained to us are really the best that we can do under these circumstances. At this point, I believe the road is not under the 30-mile-an-hour restriction. I think you leave that once you've gone past the last of the houses in Harefield on that road. So yes, vehicles will be travelling at speed, perhaps some of them, but as long as it says in the informative that appropriate signage is put in place, and presumably we can see that, and if it isn't sufficient, we can have discussion with HS2 about this, then I think we have to accept it, and I will be happy to second it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan. We are moved and seconded, but Councillor Oswald did indicate as well.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was going to second it, but there's just a couple of things. Councillor Duncan's right, and I was a little bit concerned about the trucks turning left out of that site and going down to that mini roundabout at Moor Hall Road. These will basically be 8-wheelers. Now, that's a mini roundabout. 8-wheelers do not have a good turning circle. That means they would be shunting on that mini roundabout, which is not ideal. And Councillor Labour is right. The sight lines on Harville Road are actually pretty good at this point. So I'm pretty sure that we would be all right. Look, you know, things happen, don't they? But this is a better application than the previous one. They could have done this in the first place, couldn't they? To save us getting to all this and having another item on the agenda, really, that we didn't need to have. Thank you very much, Jim.
No, thank you, Councillor Oswald. Okay, I don't see anybody else indicating, so I think we are now at natural point to conduct the vote. So we will go round. So Councillor Lavery, you moved, so I take it you're for?
Indeed.
Councillor Chapman?
For, Chairman, yeah.
Councillor Hagger?
For, Chair.
Councillor Duncan, you seconded, so I take it you're for?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Oswald?
For, Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Morgan?
With a heavy heart, yes, I'm for.
Okay, thank you. Right, that's a unanimous 6-4. Luke, do you concur that's unanimous?
Yes, I concur with that.
Okay, so we can confirm that agenda item 7 is approved. Okay, that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thanks very much for those watching on YouTube this evening, but we'll close proceedings now. Thank you and good night.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll just close the stream now.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Ian, are you still there?